Hey there, friends, it's Laurie. Let's make some Christmas DIYs. Getting started, I'm using one of these 9 by 13 Dollar Tree signs, and you can use any kind at all because we'll be working on the back. I removed the hanger and the sticker, and I'll be reusing this hanger at the end of my project. I'm using this timeless gray acrylic paint, and it's basically a light gray, and I'm going to be giving my sign 2 coats. For the tree in my project, I'm using this wired garland from the Dollar Tree, and I'll be using 6 pieces of the greenery. I'm using 1 for the base of my tree, and then the other 5 I'll turn into branches. I'm going to be using half pieces, so I'm folding each one in half and then snipping off at the fold. I have 10 pieces in total, and I'm actually only going to be using 9. To make the branches, I'm using 1 of the half pieces of greenery. I'm placing it about an inch up from the bottom against the stem, then wrapping one side around the stem and then the other. From there, I'm measuring up about an inch and adding on my next branch, placing it on the front and then wrapping one side around and then the other. From there, I'm just continuing on adding the branches, and I'm just kind of eyeballing it about an inch between each. And if you find that you have a little bit too much space or not enough, just untwist them and move them around. When I'm adding on the last branch, I'm once again leaving just about an inch on the top of the tree. Now that I'm done, because the branches are actually going sideways and not top to bottom, they're a little messy. So I'm just going to use my scissors and clean them up. I'm not going to cut them too short, but just enough to kind of get those long ends and make everything look neat. Now that it's all tidied up, I'm going to bend each of the branches down at an angle. Now that I'm done, I'm going to find the placement of the tree on my sign. And for the trunk, I'm using one of these little cut pieces of wood from the Dollar Tree. They come in a bag, and there's usually about 10 or 12 in there. To attach it, I'm using my glue gun and making sure that the bottom of the trunk sits flush with the bottom of my sign. I'm now adding some hot glue to the back of the tree, leaving about 2 inches from the top without glue. I'm then attaching it to the sign and making sure the bottom is centered on the trunk. Once in place, because the top part of my tree is not attached, I'm just slightly bending it over. As the Snowman accent on my tree, I'm using these 2 from the Dollar Tree. One has a little black top hat and the other one has a red knit hat. When I looked at these 2, the smiles are a little off and kind of messy, so I'm just going to use some of my white acrylic paint and clean them up. With the paint dry, they both look so much happier, and now I'm going to gently remove their arms. I'm attaching my first snowman, and I'm using the one with the red knit cap. I'm using my glue gun to attach him and making sure that the bottom of his body matches up with the top of the tree trunk. As soon as that snowman has set up, I'm adding on my second, and I'm placing him down on the first snowman's head and kind of at an angle on his side. Now to attach him permanently, I'm adding some hot glue to his side and attaching him at an angle. To add the arms onto my top snowman, I'm adding some hot glue to the end and then tucking it under the scarf and having it standing up against the tree. To add on the second arm, I'm placing some hot glue on the end and tucking it into his scarf, having it facing upwards. For my bottom snowman's arms, I'm once again placing on some hot glue and then tucking the outside one just under his scarf. For the inside arm, I'm once again adding on some hot glue and attaching it across from the outside arm. I'm adding a snowy accent onto the tree and I'm using my white acrylic paint. I added some to the end of my paintbrush and I'm painting it on the branches here and there, and you can add as much or as little as you'd like. I'm adding on some snow and I'm using a handful of polyfill. If you don't have any of this on hand, you can always use some cotton balls. I'm placing it down around the bottom and just kind of adding it around the tree and the base of the snowman. Then, using my hot glue gun, I'm attaching it all in place. Now that it's attached in place, I'm using my scissors to trim up the bottom and the sides, but you know, if you like it kind of fluffy, you can just leave it as is. The snowman's going to be adding a star to the top of the tree, and I'm using one of these small wooden stars from the Dollar Tree. I'm painting mine gold using my gold acrylic paint, but you can choose any color you'd like. Now that it's dry, I'm adding some hot glue to the end of the snowman's hand and the end of my tree, and then just attaching the star in place. I'm adding on a snowflake accent, and I'm using 3 of these wooden snowflakes from the Dollar Tree. I'm using my white acrylic paint and I'm giving the front of each a coat. This next step is completely optional. In the center of each snowflake there's a little hole and I want to cover it up, so I'm going to use just 3 small diamonds from this Dollar Tree diamond wrap. I cut 3 away from the roll, added a dot of hot glue in the center of each snowflake, and then just placed in the diamond. Even though I'm only adding 1 diamond in the center of each snowflake, when the light hits them just right, it gives them that little bit of sparkle. I'm finding the snowflakes placement on my sign, then using my glue gun to attach them. I'm turning my tree into a Christmas tree, and I'm using an assorted bunch of Mardi Gras beads that I had on hand. To make the Christmas ornaments, I just used my scissors to cut a bunch of them free from the different colored strands. Now that I have my ornaments cut, attaching them to the tree is super easy. I'm just adding some random dots of glue here and there and placing on the different colored beads. Decorating the tree is so fun. You can always customize the colors you use. You can add just a few, or if you're someone like me, I'm just loading mine up. With all the ornaments in place, the last thing that's left to do is to attach the original red hanger onto my sign. And with that, my snowman and their Christmas tree sign is ready to hang. Today I'm participating in my monthly Collab Group, and it's being hosted by my sweet friend Liana from Liana DIY. Our guest hosts today are Sarah from Jujubee DIY and Bree from Bree's Arts. You can check them out along with my other crafty friends by clicking on the Christmas collab playlist below in my description. If you're new to my channel, please consider clicking on that little red subscribe button below, leaving me a big thumbs up, and to all my returning friends, you're the best. To make my joy wreath sign, I'm using 3 of the small foam dice from the Dollar Tree, and I found these in the party department. I'm going to be painting them, and to make it less messy, I'm using 3 wooden skewers. These came from the Dollar Tree as well, and I'm poking one into the bottom of each of them. I'm painting 2 of them red and 1 white using my acrylic paints. I ended up giving them each 2 coats, and the strange thing was I thought that the red dice would maybe be covered with 1 coat, but that was actually the hardest dice to cover. When my 2 red dice were painted, I then painted the white. Now that they're completely dried, I'm going to be attaching all 3 of them together. I'm attaching them together using my hot glue gun, and I'm adding some hot glue onto the side with the hole where I had attached the skewer. I placed some on the red, added on the white, and then added on my last red block. I need the letter J and Y for my project, and I'm using some of the Dollar Tree wooden letters. I used the same white acrylic paint that I had used for my block, and I gave both of them a coat. While those are drying, I'm going to make a small wreath for the center of my sign, and I'm using some of this wired garland greenery from the Dollar Tree. I'm using the leftover foam dice as my guide, and all I'm doing is wrapping one end of the greenery into a circle. I checked the size against the dice to make sure it fit, and then using my clippers, I clipped off the excess greenery. To keep my circle together, I then just wrapped the 2 ends of the greenery around each other. I then once again checked the size against the dice. To make it look more like a wreath, I used my scissors and clipped around the outside and the inside to make an opening. To decorate the wreath, I'm using some assorted Mardi Gras beads, and I love using these because they're inexpensive and they look like little ornaments. I used my scissors and clipped some single beads off of the strands. I'm adding on assorted colors, and to attach them, I'm just placing some dots of glue around the wreath and placing on the beads. If you don't have any Mardi Gras beads or small beads on hand, you can always use some thin ribbon and make a small bow and add that on instead. With my wreath complete, it's now time to add it and the letters onto the blocks. To attach them, I added some hot glue on the back of my letters and centered them on the red blocks. I then added some hot glue onto the back of the wreath and attached that in the center. I'm making a bow for my sign, and I'm using some of this pretty Christmas ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I made a simple bow and then cut the tails off at an angle. I added it to the top of the blocks by simply placing on a dot of hot glue. And now my joy sign that works perfectly on a tiered tray is complete. To start my Christmas pine cone tree, I'm using one of these large pine cones from this bag of cinnamon pine cones that I picked up at my grocery store. As long as your pine cone will sit flat, you can use any style or size that you have on hand. I made sure the bottom of my pine cone will sit flat, and now I'm adding on a snowy accent. I added some white acrylic paint to the end of my paintbrush, and all I'm doing is adding some on the top and the bottom of each scale on the pine cone. While I was adding it on, I wasn't super fussy. I just kind of added it here and there so that it looked like snow. Now that it's dry, I'm going to be adding on an accent, and I'm using this mini Christmas bell garland that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. I couldn't find any mini Christmas bells at my Dollar Tree, so I'm using my clippers and snipping them off. With my bells in hand, I'm now going to attach them to the pine cone. I'm simply using my hot glue gun, adding a dot of hot glue here and there randomly around the cone, and placing down my red and green bells. You can add a different colored bell to each scale if you'd like. I didn't have enough, and I thought it was kind of overwhelming if I added too many, so I just added what was on the garland. For my pine cone Christmas tree base, I'm using one of these round wooden discs that I already had on hand. Now, if you don't have anything like this, you can always use one of the Dollar Tree sliced wood ornaments, and that will work great too. For the star on top of my Christmas tree, I'm using one of the Dollar Tree wooden stars, and using my white acrylic paint, I'm giving that and the base a coat. I chose to use my white acrylic paint, but you can paint yours any colors at all. With them both dry, I'm going to decorate the base by using some of this Dollar Tree Christmas striped ribbon. I added some hot glue in the center and then just attached the ribbon around the base. To add my pine cone onto the base, I'm using a good amount of hot glue and then holding it in place. I'm adding my star accent to the top by simply placing on a dot of hot glue and attaching it. I'm adding on 2 sprigs of greenery as a final accent, and these are just left over from some Dollar Tree picks. I used my glue gun and just attached them behind the star. And with that, this cute pine cone Christmas tree is ready for my tiered tray. To start my Christmas bell house, I'm using one of these wooden houses from the Dollar Tree. They usually have a little LED light in the back, but mine didn't come with one. That's just as well because I'm going to be covering both sides with a piece of leftover scrapbooking paper. Mine is a Christmas pattern, but you can use any pattern you'd like. I traced the house on my paper 2 times and then I cut it out. To attach my pieces to both sides of the house, I'm using a glue stick. I'm adding a generous amount to the front and the back, and then I'm just attaching my scrapbooking paper. Finding one of these houses without the little LED light in the back actually worked out to my benefit. I'm making a roof and sides for my house, and I'm using some of the wooden clothespins from the Dollar Tree. I need 20 pieces for the roof, so I'm taking apart 10 of the clothespins. When I have them all pulled apart, I'm now going to make 4 sections with 5 pieces, making sure to match up the tops and the bottoms. I'm using my Starbond thick glue to attach the pieces together. I'm adding some to the side of each, and this glue sets up super quick. If you'd like to give it a try, I do have it linked below in my description. I continued adding on the glue until I had 4 separate sections with 5 pieces. While those are drying, I'm now going to use 3 wooden clothespins to make the sides for my house. I pulled them apart and I'm going to have 2 sections, each with 3 pieces, and once again I just followed the same instructions and attached them together with my Starbond thick glue. With my 4 roof pieces dry, I'm now attaching them together. I'm attaching my 2 flat ends together, making sure they meet at the raised wood. Now that the roof and the sides have set up, I'm using my white acrylic paint and I'm giving the roof a coat on both sides and the sides just a coat on the outside. Now that they're dry, I want to give them a bit of a rustic appearance, so I'm using my sanding block and I'm just sanding away a bit on the top and the sides. Now that all 4 pieces are distressed, I'm going to add them onto the house. I'm first adding the 2 sides using my hot glue gun and placing the flat end of the side onto the support and making sure that it is flush bottom with the house. To add on the roof, I'm making sure that the 2 thicker pieces of the roof are on the top. I then added some hot glue along the roof line and attached the 2 pieces. I made sure that both of them met together tightly at the top. For the bell accent on my house, I'm using one of these Christmas bell garlands from the Dollar Tree. They're all attached together on a string, so I just used my scissors and cut them free. And once I did that, the little gold toppers, they just fell right off of the bell. I need them flat to attach them to the house, so because the bells have a little raised end, I'm just pressing that down on the table and flattening them out. For the tree's trunk, I just went outside and picked up a little branch and I cut it at about 3/4 of an inch. I'm using one of the Dollar Tree wooden stars for the star on my Christmas tree and I'm painting it with my gold acrylic paint. With the star dry, it's now time to attach the pieces to the house. I'm first finding the placement of the bells and the trunk on my tree. And when I'm happy with them, I'm then using my hot glue gun and attaching them all in place. I always like to do this first because once you add the glue, it's permanent, and if you're not really happy, then it's like you're trying to take it apart. So that's why I always like to find my placement first. To finish up, I hot glued the gold star in the center of my tree. And with that, this Christmas bell house is ready for my tiered tray. Please be sure to check out the playlist, and if you're looking for more Christmas inspiration, I'll have some linked at the end of this video. I hope you all have an amazing day, and I will see you soon. Bye, everybody!